The Shadow Doctor. In the heart of the city, where old buildings crowded against each other, there was a hospital that everyone avoided mentioning. It was an old structure, built in the 19th century, and although it was still in operation, it had a dark reputation. The few who spoke of St. Arcadia Hospital did so in whispers, as if they feared something else was listening. Dr. Ricardo Vázquez had recently transferred there, a young and ambitious doctor who saw the opportunity to work in a hospital with so much history as a springboard for his career. The hospital, however, greeted him with an oppressive feeling, as if the walls themselves held dark secrets. From his first night, he noticed something wasn't right. The hallways were incredibly long and narrow, lit only by fluorescent lights that flickered from time to time. The rooms seemed frozen in time, with old furniture and medical equipment belonging to another era. Despite the advanced technology in other areas of the hospital, everything here seemed stagnant, stuck in a bygone era. The staff was cordial but distant. They seemed to avoid any unnecessary chatter and always had a tired expression on their faces. No one wanted to talk about the south wing of the hospital, a section sealed off and abandoned years ago after an incident no one wanted to remember. One night, as Ricardo was finishing his shift, an older nurse approached him with a worried tone. "Doctor, you better not stay here too late," she said, whispering as if she didn't want anyone else to hear her. "There are things that shouldn't be disturbed." Ricardo smiled, thinking it was a joke or some superstition, but the look in the nurse's eyes made him doubt. That same night, after everyone had left, he decided to explore the hospital, intrigued by the mysteries that surrounded him. He walked through the empty hallways, where only the echo of his footsteps accompanied him. Finally, he reached the door leading to the south wing. Despite being sealed, the door opened easily, as if it had been waiting for him. On the other side, the air was thick, heavy, as if something invisible was crawling through it. The darkness was total, broken only by the weak beam of light from his flashlight. The hallway that stretched out before him seemed endless, and as he moved forward, Ricardo began to hear a faint rustling, an indistinguishable murmur that seemed to come from the walls themselves. His heart began to beat faster, but his curiosity pushed him onward. The rooms in this part of the hospital were empty, but something about them didn't feel right. The beds were neatly made, but covered in dust, and the curtains moved slightly, though there was no draft. In the background, the murmur grew louder, becoming clearer, but still incomprehensible. Suddenly, at the end of the hallway, Ricardo saw a faint light flickering from one of the rooms. Cautiously, he approached and pushed open the door, finding a scene that made him stop dead in his tracks. In the room, there was an old operating table, and on it, what appeared to be the body of a patient. But this was no ordinary body. The figure was shrouded in shadow, as if darkness itself was clinging to its skin. Murmurs filled the room, becoming deafening. Ricardo felt the cold envelop him, but he couldn't move, trapped by the sight before him. The figure on the table began to move slowly, its head turning towards him. There were no eyes on its face, only two deep black sockets that seemed to absorb all light. "Why have you come?" The voice that emerged from the figure was not human, it was a distorted, resonant echo, as if it came from a deep abyss. Ricardo tried to speak, but his voice refused to come out. Fear paralyzed him, and all he could do was watch as the figure rose from the table. Her form was amorphous, a blur of shadows that stretched across the room, devouring the light and hope. In an instant, she was right in front of him, and a hand, cold as death itself, reached out for his chest. "You will stay with me," the voice whispered, and in that moment, Ricardo felt a stabbing pain in his chest, as if something was tearing at his soul. Everything around him began to fade, and before he lost consciousness, the last thing he saw was the door to the room closing, as if the hospital itself was sealing him into his fate. The next morning, hospital staff found the south wing door completely closed, as if it had never been opened. There were no signs of Dr. Vázquez, and no one dared to investigate what happened. It was simply murmured at those who entered the south wing and never left. Over time, Ricardo became another whisper in the dark, a soul trapped in the heart of the hospital, next to the shadows that awaited him. And so, the Saint Arcadia continued to function, with its patients ignorant of the horror that lulled in its bowels, while the shadows awaited its next victim.